Jake had always thought of himself as a simple guy. He wasn't one for complicated situations, preferring the comfort of quiet spaces and routine. But everything changed the day he received the offer. It was unexpected, a bit strange, and way beyond his normal life. It started with an email. At first, Jake thought it was just another scam, something that would waste a few minutes of his time. But the offer was too real, too professional to ignore. The email was from a company called the Intergalactic Relief Network, an organization that provided care for important figures in the galaxy. It had an unusual request. They needed a human, specifically someone with a background in healthcare, to take care of an alien princess. 8. She had been injured during a diplomatic mission and required someone to assist in her recovery. The job seemed simple enough: monitor her condition, help with daily tasks, and make sure she was comfortable while she healed. The pay was more than enough to catch Jake's attention, and the company promised that everything would be arranged: travel, accommodations, and all the expenses. The catch was that the job was far from Earth. In fact, it was located on a space station orbiting a planet on the edge of the galaxy, an area most humans had only heard of in stories. Despite his unease, Jake decided to accept. He figured it would be an easy job, something to keep him busy for a few months. After all, he'd been working in the healthcare field for years and had taken care of people with all sorts of needs. How hard could it be? The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. He was sent several documents about the alien princess, named Lasara, but they didn't explain much about her personally. It was all about her condition, her species, and the medical care she required. He was told she was an important figure in her home galaxy, but aside from that, he didn't know. Anything more? He hadn't been briefed on what to expect or how to handle her specific needs beyond the basics of her recovery. Once on the ship heading for the station, Jake couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness. He had never left Earth before, let alone traveled to another galaxy. The vastness of space was overwhelming, but it was also exhilarating. He thought about all the strange new things he might see, the alien cultures he would encounter, and what it would be like to interact with beings from other worlds. The journey was long, but Jake finally arrived at the space station, which looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. It was massive, with multiple levels and gleaming surfaces. The station had everything from medical facilities to luxurious suites for important guests. Jake was guided through the sterile halls by a woman who worked for the Intergalactic Relief Network. She barely spoke to him, leading him through the endless corridors without much explanation. When they reached Lasara's quarters, the door opened to reveal a beautiful room filled with soft light and alien plants. It was luxurious, with a stunning view of the stars outside. But it wasn't the room that caught Jake's attention. It was the woman lying on the bed. Princess Lasara was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. She had an otherworldly beauty, her skin a shimmering shade of violet that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. Her eyes were a deep shade of green, and they seemed to hold a world of secrets. Her hair was long, silver, and flowed like liquid light. But despite her ethereal appearance, there was a fragility to her that Jake could sense immediately. Body was wrapped in medical gauze, and she appeared to be in a deep sleep. Her breathing steady but slow. Jake stood in the doorway, unsure of what to do next. The woman who had hired him had already left, leaving him alone in this strange place with the princess. Hello? Jake said, not sure if she could hear him. There was no response. He stepped inside the room and approached the bed, where Lasara lay unconscious. He'd been told she was in a deep recovery, but there was something about her that felt different. She wasn't just an alien princess with a royal title. She felt real, vulnerable, and for a moment, Jake wasn't sure if he should be there. He checked the monitor beside her bed, making sure everything was functioning properly. Her vitals were stable, but her injuries were serious. The doctors back on Earth had done what they could, but there was still a long road ahead for her recovery. Jake reached for the communicator on the desk to report in. But as he did, Lasara stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment Jake froze. Her gaze was sharp, almost as if she could see straight through him. She blinked a few times, clearly disoriented, before her lips parted. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice soft but full of authority. Jake blinked. He hadn't expected her to wake up so soon. He cleared his throat, trying to remember the protocol. "I'm Jake," he said, unsure of how to address her. "I've been assigned to take care of you while you recover." The princess stared at him for a long moment, her eyes scanning him as though she was trying to determine if he was trustworthy. "Are human?" she asked, her voice filled with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Jake nodded. "Yes, I'm a caregiver, trained to help with injuries and recovery. I'll be here to assist you in any way I can." Lysara raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "I've never had a human caregiver before." Jake wasn't sure what to make of her tone. It wasn't hostile, but there was something about it that made him feel uneasy. He knew that being an alien princess, she was likely used to being around people of great importance, not someone like him. "I understand this may be a strange situation," Jake said, trying to keep things light. "But I'm here to make sure you're comfortable and help you get better." Lysara looked at him for a moment, her eyes softening just a little before she nodded. "Very well, Jake. I'll allow you to assist me." She closed her eyes. Again, Jake couldn't help but feel a strange sense of curiosity. He was here to help, yes, but he wasn't prepared for what would come next. There was something different about Lysara, something that wasn't immediately obvious. And as he began his duties, he couldn't shake the feeling that this job would become much more complicated than he had ever imagined. The days following Jake's arrival at the space station were a blur of routine. His tasks were simple enough: monitor Lysara's condition, help her with meals, and ensure she had everything she needed while she recovered. But despite his professional approach, there was an unease that lingered between him and the princess. Lysara, while grateful for his care, still kept a distance. As if unsure of how to interact with him, Jake couldn't help but feel like an outsider. Every time he looked at Lysara, she seemed so different from the people he was used to on Earth. She was regal, graceful, and despite her injury, commanded attention without even trying. He had read the files about her Princess Lysara of the Irizian Empire, one of the most powerful royal families in the galaxy. But there was something about her that didn't fit the image he had in his mind. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was a person with real feelings, fears, and desires. Lysara, for her part, was just as uncertain about Jake. She had grown up surrounded by alien diplomats, royalty, and advisors, all of them highly trained and perfect in their interactions. But here was a human, a simple caretaker, who was now tasked with caring for her in the most intimate way. It wasn't easy for her to trust him, but the longer she lay in bed, the more she began to appreciate his care and attention. She had been through countless treatments and healing processes before, but something about Jake was different. He was kind without being overbearing, attentive without being intrusive. In the quiet moments when he helped her with simple tasks, Lysara began to notice something she hadn't expected. Jake's touch was gentle but confident. His eyes were kind, and he never seemed to judge her. There was a warmth to him, something familiar that made her feel less alone in the vast emptiness of space. On the third day, as Jake entered her quarters to check on her, he found her sitting up in bed, a soft sigh escaping her lips as she stared out the window at the stars. For a moment, she didn't even notice him standing there. "You look deep in thought," Jake said, stepping inside. Lysara turned to him with a small, surprised smile. "I suppose I was. Just thinking about home." Jake nodded, though he didn't fully understand. "I can't imagine what it's like to be so far from your home." Her smile faded slightly. "It's more than just the distance, Jake. It's the expectations. As a princess, I've been taught to always be in control, to always know what to do. But now, I'm in a position where I need help, and I don't like it." Jake could sense the vulnerability in her words. It was something he hadn't expected from someone like her. She was a princess, after all. She should have been strong, always in charge. But here she was, admitting her weakness to him, a stranger. It made him feel uneasy, but also honored. She trusted him more than she let on. "I understand, Jake," said, sitting down in the chair beside her bed. But needing help doesn't make you weak, Lysera. Everyone needs help sometimes. She turned to him, her eyes softening as she looked into his face. And you, Jake? Do you need help? Jake paused for a moment. He wasn't used to being asked about himself. He'd always been the one to take care of others, never the one to need anything. I guess I never really thought about it, Jake said with a small laugh. But I suppose we all need a little help now and then. Kisara looked at him as if she was considering something. I find it strange, she said slowly, that someone like you, someone so simple, can be so kind. So understanding. It makes me wonder if maybe there's more to humans than I've been taught. Jake blinked, taken aback by her words. What do you mean, humans? She continued, her voice thoughtful. You're often seen as weak, naive. Your species is young, still learning. But in you, I see something else. A warmth. A gentleness. I've met many beings in my life, but none like you. Jake didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't used to being praised, especially by someone so important. It made him uncomfortable, but also flattered. He shifted in his seat, unsure of what to do with the strange feeling that was growing inside him. I'm just doing my job, Jake said, trying to keep things casual. You don't have to say anything like that. But Lysara was quiet for a moment, as if she was lost in thought. Then she spoke again, this time with a hint of playfulness in her voice. I wasn't just talking about your kindness, Jake, she said with a sly smile. Jake's heart skipped a beat, but he tried to keep his expression neutral. What do you mean? Lysara leaned forward slightly, her eyes twinkling. I've been watching you, Jake. You seem so human, so real. There's something about you that draws me in, and I can't help but wonder what it would be like to be close to someone like you. Her words hung in the air between them, heavy and unexpected. Jake's mind raced, wasn't sure what to make of her statement. Was she just being polite, or was there something more behind her words? Jake started, but he didn't know how to finish. He had no experience with royalty, let alone with someone as powerful and beautiful as Lysara. Thing he wanted was to make things awkward. Lysara's smile faded, and she leaned back against the pillows, her gaze turning distant once again. I suppose I shouldn't have said that, she said softly. It was foolish of me. Jake didn't know what to say. He could feel the tension building between them, but he wasn't sure how to navigate it. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable, but he also couldn't deny the strange pull he felt towards her. She was beautiful, yes, but there was more to her than that. She was intelligent, confident, and yet, in this moment, she was vulnerable something he hadn't expected from a princess Lysara. Jake began, but he was interrupted by the soft chime of her communication device. I'm sorry, she said quickly, wiping away any trace of her earlier mood. I have to take this. We'll talk later. Jake nodded, standing up and making his way toward the door. Of course, I'll be outside if you need me. As he left the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that things had just shifted between them. What had started as a professional relationship was beginning to feel much more complicated. And as Jake walked down the hallway, he couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Could he keep things professional with Lysara, or was he in danger of crossing a line he didn't fully understand? The days continued to pass in a quiet, almost monotonous rhythm. Jake's routine remained mostly the same. He would check Lysara's vitals, help her with meals, and ensure she was as comfortable as possible. But beneath the surface of their professional interactions, something had shifted. There was a tension in the air, a growing awareness between them that neither could ignore. Lysara, despite her regal nature, began to spend more time with Jake. At first, it was small things conversations that started about her recovery, but slowly, they drifted into more personal topics. They talked about Earth, about the stars, and about the things that made them feel alive. Each conversation left Jake with a sense of wonder about her culture, her experiences, and her perspective on the universe. He hadn't expected to feel this way about a princess, but there was something about Lysara that was different. She was more than just royalty. She was a person with dreams and fears, just like anyone else. One evening, after Jake had helped Lysara settle into bed, she surprised him by asking a question that took him off guard. Jake, she began, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. What do humans long for? Jake sat down in the chair beside her, looking at her curiously. What do you mean? You're so different from the beings I'm used to. I've met aliens from all corners of the galaxy, but none like you. You don't act like others. You're not interested in power or wealth, you're simple. But there's a quiet strength about you. It makes me wonder what it is that you long for. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He hadn't expected to be asked about his deepest desires. He wasn't sure what to say. He had never really thought about it, I guess. I long for peace, Jake said after a moment, trying to put his thoughts into words. I don't want fame or fortune. I just want to live a quiet life, without too many complications. Lysara nodded thoughtfully. Peace, she repeated. Softly, I understand that. It's something we all seek, no matter where we come from. Jake looked at her, sensing a change in her mood. Her expression was soft, almost wistful. She seemed lost in her thoughts for a moment, as if she were reflecting on something far away. But you're not like them, are you? Sarah continued, her voice breaking the silence. The others I've met, those who live for power and control. You're different, I find that. It's interesting. Jake wasn't sure what to say. He didn't know how to respond to her observation. He was used to being around people who were focused on their own ambitions, not someone like Lysara who had so much to lose. He wondered what it was about him that had caught her attention. I'm just doing my job, Jake said, shrugging. I don't think I'm that special. Lysara looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. But you are, Jake. You've shown me something I never thought I would see. A simple kindness, a way of being that is. Real. No one has ever made me feel the way you do. The words hit Jake like a wave, and for a moment, he didn't know how to react. He could see the truth in her eyes, the vulnerability, the longing. It was a side of her that no one had ever seen, and it made Jake feel like he was standing on the edge of something important, something he couldn't understand fully, but felt deeply. I don't know what you mean, he said softly, though. He could feel the pull between them growing stronger. Lysara sighed, her expression turning pensive. I was never allowed to experience the world like you do. Jake, I was raised with a certain image of who I should be, what I should desire. But now I find myself wondering what it would be like to be free of that. To be with someone who doesn't expect anything from me. Someone who sees me for who I really am. Jake's heart raced, but he remained silent. He wasn't sure where this conversation was going, but he could feel the intensity of it. Lysara wasn't just the princess anymore. She was a woman, a person with needs and desires, just like him. And in that moment, he realized how much he wanted to help her. Not just as her caretaker, but as someone who cared deeply about her happiness. But there was a catch. He couldn't ignore the fact that Lysara was a princess, and he was just a simple human. There were rules, boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. He had to remind himself that his job was to care for her, nothing more. Yet every time they talked, it became harder to deny the chemistry between them. The next morning, as Jake prepared to bring Lysara her breakfast, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between them. It wasn't just the words they had exchanged the night before, but the way she looked at him now. There was something in her gaze that made him feel both powerful and vulnerable at the same time. When he entered her room, Lysara was already awake. Sitting up in bed, she smiled when she saw him, her eyes lighting up in a way that made Jake's heart flutter. Good morning, Jake, she said softly. Good morning, Your Highness, he replied, trying to maintain a professional tone, though. It felt unnatural now. She gestured for him to sit beside her. Please, just call me Lysara. We're past the formalities now, aren't we? Jake hesitated for a moment before nodding. All right, Lysara. The sound of her name on his lips felt strange, but also ... right. He couldn't deny the connection he felt to her. There was something magnetic about her, something that pulled him in no matter how hard he tried to resist. Lysara looked at him closely, her gaze intense. You know, Jake, I've never met anyone like you. Most people would be afraid to speak. To me the way you do, but you. You've made me feel like a person, not just a princess. And that's something I didn't think I needed until now. Jake felt a lump in his throat. He didn't know how to respond. He'd never been good with compliments, especially from someone like Lysara. He wasn't sure if she was saying these things out of kindness or something more. But one thing was clear: things were changing between them. Neither of them could stop it. "I'm just here to help you," Jake said quietly, though he wasn't sure if he truly believed it anymore. "Nothing more." Lysara smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "I think you've already done more than you realize." As the days went on, Jake found himself walking a fine line between professional distance and personal connection. He had never been in a situation like this before, and it made him feel both alive and afraid. But as he continued to care for Lysara, he couldn't help but wonder what the future held for them. Could he keep his distance? Or would the growing tension between them pull them closer together, no matter the consequences? Days had passed, and the growing connection between Jake and Lysara was becoming harder to ignore. Every moment spent together seemed to blur the line between their professional roles and the bond they were forming. Jake tried his best to remain focused on his duties, but he couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in Lysara's behavior. She was no longer the distant, cold princess he had first met. She was more open, more vulnerable, and much more interested in him than he had expected. Lysara had even started asking him about his past, his life back on Earth. It was clear she was trying to understand him as a person, not just as a caregiver. They talked about his childhood, his family, and his dreams. Jake shared more than he ever thought he would, finding comfort in her attentive listening and genuine curiosity. One afternoon, as Jake helped Lysara with her physical therapy exercises, he noticed a change in her. She seemed more tired than usual, her movements slower, and her eyes a little distant. It was as if something was weighing on her mind. He paused for a moment, watching her closely. "Lysara, are you okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. She looked up at him, her face softening. "I'm fine, Jake. Just tired. It's nothing to worry about." Jake wasn't convinced. He could tell that something was troubling her, but he didn't want to push her too hard. They had come so far in their conversations, and he didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable. But it was hard to ignore the worry in her eyes. "You don't have to hide anything from me," Jake said gently. "Something's bothering you. I want to help." Lysara's expression softened, and she let out a long sigh. "I know. It's just ... difficult. I've never had anyone care for me like this before. I don't know how to handle it." He had suspected that Lysara's royal life had been isolating, but hearing it from her directly made it feel all the more real. She had been surrounded by advisors and guards, but none of them seemed to truly care about her as a person. She had always been seen as the princess, the ruler, the symbol of her empire. But beneath all that, she was just a woman, looking for something more. "I understand," Jake said softly, sitting beside her. "It's hard to open up to people, especially when you're used to being in control all the time. But I'm here. For you, I'm not going anywhere." Lysara's eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something deeper than gratitude. She looked at him as if she were trying to find the right words to say, but nothing came. Instead, she simply reached out and took his hand, the warmth of her touch sending a wave of electricity through Jake's body. "I never expected any of this," Lysara said quietly. "I thought this would just be a simple recovery. I didn't expect to form a bond with you. But now, I don't know what to do with these feelings." Jake's breath caught in his throat. The way she spoke was so raw, so honest. It was clear she was struggling with the emotions she was experiencing, and he could see the vulnerability in her eyes. She was opening up to him in a way she had never done with anyone else. It was a moment of clarity for him. He realized that their relationship was no longer just about him taking care of her. It was about two people connecting on a level that went beyond their roles. "Lysara," Jake began, his voice softer than he intended. "I don't know what's happening between us, but I can't pretend it's not there. I care about you." "Too." Lysara squeezed his hand gently, a small smile playing on her lips. "I don't know what to do with this, Jake. I've spent my life being told who I am, what I should be. But you, ... you make me feel like I'm just Lysara, not a princess, just a woman who wants to feel something real." The weight of her words settled over Jake like a blanket. He had never imagined that his job as a caretaker would turn into something so much more. But now, as he sat there with Lasara, holding her hand and looking into her eyes, he realized that they had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. What they had was no longer just a professional relationship. It was something deeper. Something more complicated than either of them had anticipated. For a moment, they both sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Jake knew that things couldn't go back to the way they were. The feelings they had for each other had already taken root, and there was no way to push them aside. But at the same time, he knew that their relationship could never be simple. Lasara was a princess, and he was just a human. There were so many obstacles in their way, so many things that could tear them apart. Lysara broke the silence first. "I've been hiding something from you, Jake. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Jake looked at her, his heart beating faster. "What is it?" She hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I wasn't just injured in a diplomatic mission. My injury. It was a result of a failed assassination attempt. Someone tried to kill me." Jake's eyes widened in shock. He hadn't expected that. The gravity of her words sank in, and he felt his protective instincts flare up. "Lasara, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want you to worry," she said softly. "I didn't want to burden you with my problems. But now, I see that I can't do this alone. I need someone who cares about me, who sees me for who I really am." Jake's heart ached. For her, he could see the pain in her eyes, the weight of her secret pressing down on her. She had been living with this fear and uncertainty, and now she was finally sharing it with him. It made him realize just how much she trusted him. "You're not alone, Lasara," Jake said firmly. "You never have to be. I'm here for you, no matter what." Lasara's eyes softened, and for the first time since he had met her, she seemed truly at peace. She let out a deep breath, as if a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. "Thank you, Jake," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "Thank you for being here." Jake squeezed her hand, a promise between them. Whatever the future held, he knew one thing for certain: they were in this together. Whatever secrets Lysara had been hiding, he would stand by her, ready to face whatever came their way. Jake's mind raced after Lysara's confession. The truth about her injury, the attempt on her life, added a new layer of complexity to their already difficult situation. He had come here to care for her, to help her heal from physical wounds. But now he realized that the emotional scars she carried were just as deep, if not deeper. For the next few days, things between them felt different. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a bond that neither of them could ignore. Lasara was no longer just the princess he had been hired to take care of. She was someone he cared about deeply. He could see that she felt the same way. Lasara's vulnerability had brought them closer, but it had also made Jake question his feelings. He had never been one to act on impulse or emotion, but with Lasara, it was different. She had opened up to him in a way no one ever had. And now, he found himself thinking about her constantly. Every time she smiled at him, every time their hands brushed, it was as if something inside him shifted. But he knew that their situation was complicated. She was royalty, and he was just a human caretaker. There were rules and spoken ones that they both had to follow. The consequences of crossing certain boundaries could be far-reaching, both for them and for the galaxy itself. One afternoon, while Lysara was resting, Jake found himself standing by the window, staring out at the stars. His mind was filled with thoughts of her, her smile, her laughter, the way she had opened up to him. He knew he was beginning to fall for her, and it scared him. He didn't want to complicate things, but the more he tried to push his feelings away, the more they seemed to grow. Just then, he heard a soft knock on the door. He turned around to see Lasara standing in the doorway, her expression serious but soft. "Jake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" Jake nodded, stepping aside to let her in. She walked into the room, her movements graceful, but there was an air of tension about her. She was still recovering, and he could see the faint signs of fatigue on her face. But there was something else in her eyes, a restlessness, a longing that he couldn't ignore. "What's on your mind?" Jake asked, his voice gentle. Lasara hesitated for a moment before speaking. her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made Jake's heart skip a beat. "I've been thinking a lot about what we've been through," she began, her tone soft but firm. "About everything that's happened between us, and I think it's time I be honest with you." Jake's stomach tightened. He had a feeling he knew where this conversation was heading, but he couldn't stop the flood of emotions that rose within him. "I don't know what this is, Jake," Lysara continued, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't know what we're becoming, but I can't deny that there's something between us. Something I've never felt before, and it scares me." Jake's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen Lysara so vulnerable, so unsure of herself. For a moment, he just stood there, unsure of how to respond. He knew that whatever he said next could change everything. "I feel the same way," Jake said quietly. "I've tried to ignore it, tried to keep things professional, but I can't. There's something about you, Lysara. Something that draws me to you." Lysara stepped closer to him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to read his thoughts. "But it's not that simple, is it? We're not just two people. You're my caretaker, and I'm a princess. There are lines we can't cross." Jake felt a pang of frustration. He had known this all along, but hearing her say it out loud made it even more real. He couldn't deny that their relationship was complicated, but he also couldn't deny the feelings that had been growing between them. "I know," he said softly, "but I don't want to let those lines define us. I don't want to lose what we have." Lysara looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing her options. She had always been taught to keep her emotions in check, to prioritize duty over personal desires. But now, as she stood in front of Jake, she realized that she couldn't continue to deny what was in her heart. "I don't want to lose this either," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Without thinking, Jake reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. He could feel her breath against his skin, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. There were no titles, no rules, no expectations, just the two of them, standing in this quiet room, sharing a moment that felt like it could change everything. Lysara's eyes fluttered shut as she leaned into his touch, her face softening. She had never let anyone get this close. Not like this. She had spent her life surrounded by people who wanted something from her, but Jake had shown her something different. He had shown her kindness, care, and a part of herself that she had kept hidden for so long before either of them could say anything more. The space between them closed, and in an instant, their lips met. It was a soft, tentative kiss at first, as if they were both testing the waters. But soon, the kiss deepened, fueled by the emotions they had been holding back for so long. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise, a declaration of everything they had been feeling but hadn't yet admitted. When they finally pulled away, both of them were breathless, their hearts racing. Lysara rested her forehead against Jake's, her eyes still closed as she tried to catch her breath. "I don't know what happens next," she said softly, her voice shaky. "But I know I don't want to go back. I don't want to pretend this isn't real." Jake smiled gently, his heart full of emotions he wasn't sure how to express. "We don't have to go back. We'll figure it out together." For the first time since they had met, Jake felt a sense of certainty. He didn't know what the future held for them, but in that moment, he knew that they were no longer just two people with a professional relationship. They were something more, something powerful, something real, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The days after Jake and Lysara's kiss felt different, but also oddly peaceful. They had crossed a line they couldn't uncross, and though the consequences were still unknown, the bond they shared seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. They both knew that things would never be the same, but for the first time, they were willing to face the unknown together. As the days passed, their connection became undeniable. Lysara still had her responsibilities as a princess, and Jake remained her caretaker. But now, there was something more between them, something that couldn't be ignored. Every glance, every touch was loaded with meaning. Their conversations, once casual, were now filled with shared thoughts, hopes, and dreams. It wasn't just about her recovery anymore, it was about their future. Jake found himself thinking about Lysara more than he ever expected. He had come to care for her in ways he couldn't explain. She wasn't just a princess to him anymore. She was someone he admired, someone he wanted to protect, someone he cared for deeply. Her strength, her vulnerability, and her intelligence fascinated him. But it wasn't just her beauty, it was her heart that drew him in. Lysara, too, began to feel the weight of her feelings. She had spent her entire life under the pressure of being the perfect princess, the ruler who could never show weakness. But with Jake, she could finally let down her guard. He didn't expect her to be perfect. He saw her for who she truly was. Woman who longed for freedom, love, and acceptance. One evening, as Jake entered Lysara's quarters to help her prepare for bed, he found her sitting by the window, staring out at the stars. She looked deep in thought, her expression distant, as if she were lost in a world far away. "Everything okay?" Jake asked softly, stepping into the room. Lysara turned her head to look at him, her eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. "I was just thinking about everything. About us." Jake walked over to her and sat down beside her. He had learned to read her well by now, and he could tell that something was on her mind. "What's going on?" he asked gently. Lysara sighed, her fingers running along the edge of the window. "I've spent my whole life being told what I should want, what I should do. But now, with you, everything feels different. I never imagined that I would feel this way about someone. I've always been told that I must marry for duty, that my life is not my own, that my heart doesn't matter. But now, I feel as though I've found something that matters more than anything else." Jake's heart ached. As he listened to her words, he knew she had been through so much pressure, so much expectation. But hearing her admit that she had found something real with him made him realize just how important their relationship had become. "You're not alone in this," Jake said, taking her hand gently in his. "I may not know everything about your world, but I know that I care about you. I'll stand by you no matter what comes." Lysara turned to face him, her eyes shining with emotion. She had always been taught to suppress her feelings, to hide her true desires behind the weight of her royal duties. But now, with Jake, she could be honest, and for the first time, it felt like a relief. "I know," she whispered. I don't know what happens next, Jake, but I don't want to let go of this. I don't want to let go of you." Jake squeezed her hand, a soft smile crossing his face. "Then we'll face it together. Whatever happens next, we'll do it together." Next few days were filled with a quiet sense of uncertainty, but also hope. Lysara's recovery was progressing steadily, and Jake continued to care for her. But there was an underlying tension that neither of them could ignore. The truth was, they both knew that their relationship had become more than just a caregiver-patient dynamic. They were becoming something else, something neither of them had expected. One morning, while they were sitting together in her room, Lysara suddenly broke the silence. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady but serious. "I can't stay here forever. I can't keep living this way, hidden away from the rest of the galaxy. I've spent too much time in the shadows, trying to be something I'm not. I need to make a choice." Jake looked at her, his heart pounding. He knew what she meant. She had a duty to her empire, to her people, but she also had a chance at something more, something real. "What do you want, Lysara?" Jake asked softly, his voice full of hope. Lysara looked out the window as if contemplating her words. After a long pause, she turned back to him, her expression resolute. "I want to live my life on my own terms," she said. "I want to be with you, Jake. I want to see the galaxy, explore the universe, and be free from all the expectations that have been placed on me. I want to be with someone who doesn't see me as a princess, but as a person." Jake's heart swelled with emotion. He had never imagined that Lysara would make such a decision, one that would change everything for both of them. But in that moment, he realized that she was truly ready to embrace the life she had always wanted, and he would be there with her every step of the way. "If that's what you want," Jake said, his voice filled with determination, "then I'll be with you. We'll figure it out together." Lysara smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face. "Thank you, Jake. I can't do this alone, but with you, I think we can make it work." The weight of the decision hung in the air, but there was a sense of freedom in it too. They didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, they were both ready to face it head on, together, and so they began to make plans. Lasara would leave behind her royal duties, the life that had been chosen for her. They would travel the galaxy, explore new worlds, and discover what it meant to be free. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges ahead, obstacles they hadn't yet imagined, but they were ready. As they sat together hand in hand, watching the stars outside the window, they knew that no matter what came next, they had each other, and that was enough.